Well, again,
or the cycles are such you can't do much?
I think if we go back and we look at history, there are three main things that you can do, okay? First, as a society individually and then collectively, how do you earn more money than you spend? And how do you build a balance sheet that has more assets than liabilities? That's a healthy, and so keeping that in mind. The second is internal conflict or cooperation. Can you have internal cooperation because you realize what the consequences are? So I think that in the 2024 elections, there is a reasonable chance that neither party will accept losing the elections. And that is something that means that democracy, or a type of civil war of sorts, could develop in a way, this is realistic, I'm not being exaggerated by that. And when one looks at those types of things, there is a worry that one should have about the divisiveness and what it means for each other. And the same is true internationally. So basically, anybody who has gone into wars, this through history, the people who are the most convinced that that's the thing to do all regretted going into wars because of what wars are like. So the things that I would hope to convey is, first of all, what are the arcs? Is that right or wrong in the arcs? Measured, not opinionated. Just look at those measurements so that you could see that. And then as we think about it, like I have a principle. If you worry, you don't have to worry. And if you don't worry, you need to worry. And what I mean by that is if you worry and you start to think what this direction could be and what it's like, then maybe you deal with the things that prevent those worries, where if you don't worry, maybe you get into trouble without worrying or with a confidence. One of the arcs is also people who've never been through a war. You know, our memories are with us, not necessarily our parents' memories. And because of those conflicts and so on, they take for granted the fact that we couldn't have a conflict, those types of conflicts. So those are the things, there are things we can do. The world has now more resources than it has ever had, and there are things that can be done.
Now, you are an early proponent of China being a growing economic power, and you've spent a lot of time in China. What do you think China thinks of us right now as an economic power? They think we're declining, or they think we are a big rival for them economically for a long time in the future?
I think Americans, people in other countries, and Chinese and so on would all worry. I think you're of an age, and I'm of an age to know.
Exactly the same age.
5 days apart, by the way.
Right.
Of an age to know that this is not the way it was in earlier years, and to worry about some of the things that I'm mentioning.
Okay, let me ask you this. The average person watching right now probably doesn't have $150 billion to manage the investment of. So what can the average person do to invest reasonably well?
Well, you know, like I didn't have any money, and I remember the cycle. And what it was is I would start to think, how much money do I have how many weeks, months, and then years can I take care of myself and my family? And I would calculate that. I would be at, okay, 52 years, if no income was going to come in. And then I would start to think, and then if I'm holding a portfolio in something, maybe I could lose half, so I better cut that number in half. And then I start to think of what are my uses of the money? What do I need to do? And I would think about how do I immunize that? And you start and you build like that, and you know how to save. And saving, you know things like don't put it into cash deposits that get eroded by inflation and taxes and so on, and you start to develop it. And the thing that you can do, the most important thing you could do is not be in cash and those deposits, particularly now when there's such negative real rates, and to have a well-diversified portfolio. And that well-diversified portfolio, that's a whole subject of what does that mean and how to do it, but it's a well-diversified portfolio of not just asset classes, but of countries, of of different currencies.
Diversified. But let me ask you, an average person who isn't, a billionaire, should they expect to get a rate of return overall on their money of 5% a year? Is that a good target? 6%, 8%? What do you think is a reasonable target for somebody who doesn't want to take undue risks?
Well, nowadays, the structure of the markets and where everything is priced, and done the normal way, will give you probably a return in the vicinity of, with a lot of risk around it, maybe in the vicinity of 4%,
okay.
4%. Okay, something that might not equal inflation, probably it'd be very close, and then you have to pay taxes on it, because there are so many financial assets. But one thing you can, they'll send you more money.
So Warren Buffett famously has said that in the end, you're better off to go into a stock index fund than in a hedge fund, and he's made bets about that. Obviously, he's not an investor in your fund because he would have done well, but do you think an average investor who doesn't really know the markets, should they just go into stock funds or bond funds? Is that the safest thing for most people?
In any one thing, you have to understand, like from 1966 to 1984, the stock market had a negative real return. Went down 54% till 82, okay? And you could lose a lot of buying power. Any one thing, just please understand this, any one thing is a risky thing over probably a relevant time frame for the individual. And that's why knowing how to balance a portfolio, knowing how to achieve that balance, the thing that's magical about it is you can reduce your risk without reducing your return.
Okay. As we talk today, the stock market in the last couple of weeks has been correcting, if that's the right verb, and a lot of the air is out of the so-called bubble. Should people be selling everything and getting out of the market now because the markets are going down, or is this the time to buy?
First of all, I'm not here to give a lot of advice, but I'll give you the following thoughts.
We won't tell anybody. Just give us a
okay, just on our own. What's happened is they produced a lot of debt and gave out a lot of money, and so everybody's got money, and it's also very easy to borrow money to buy things. And as a result, if you create much more buying power than you create goods and services, you've got much more inflation. And the Federal Reserve has been behind the curve, slower to tighten monetary policy. And as a result, we're now starting to see the rise in interest rates to be able to deal with that. As that happens, all assets compete with each other. So now that free money is still going to be cheap money, but it's going to be a bit higher. So interest rates, let's say bond yields, have gone up about 1%. Now you take that and you adjust, everything is the present value of future cash flows, but it means that interest rate goes up 1%. That means all the other assets have to adjust. We're in a process of making that kind of adjustment. That means the days that we've had before, the easy days where they dump money on you and you don't have much inflation and you don't have much tightness, those are past. And now we're in a different kind of part of the cycle.
Okay, so you said earlier that you're in the stage of life where you're basically giving away money. You're an original signer of the Giving Pledge, and you've decided to give away a lot of money. What areas are interesting to you in philanthropy?
Well, we do it as pretty much a family activity. We have different, my wife, in my case, there are a number of things. I grew up in a modest background, and I like finance. So I like microfinance. I support Grameen America, for example, and those that produce microfinance. My wife and I are dealing with kids who can't get through education. We're trying to support that in those various ways. I have a passion about ocean exploration. 72% of the world's surface is ocean, and it's not been explored, and so I support various ways the creation of ocean exploration. Mental illness is a very important subject to us. There are, and then in our family, each has their own particular things. So it's we went in COVID. We set up a clinic with New York Presbyterian Hospital for health justice, which reaches out to a population.
Right.
It's a little bit of.
So you're not investing, and you're not transcendental meditating, and you're not writing books and doing philanthropy. What are you doing? You have any outside interest?
Number one is my grandkids. Okay, my kids, my family, of course. And they're one of the greatest blessings in life that one ever can possibly have is one's.
How many grandchildren do you have?
I have 4 now.
What do they call you?
Papa.
Not Mr. Dalio or something like that? All right, so I wouldn't be surprised that this is the first question that I've been asked to read you. How do you foresee crypto impacting the world order?